in America, we could all go home. The communists couldn't elect a dog catcher for a flea-bitten dog with rabies if he ran as a communist candidate. How is it then that Khrushchev can arrogantly boast that although he is 66 years old and does not have much longer to live, nevertheless he hopes and expects to live to see the day that the red flag covers all the earth? How is it that the 81 communist parties can meet and they can announce with arrogant confidence that world communist victory is very, very near? Communism believes in violence and practices violence. The great communist authorities have never hidden this. Karl Marx, the founder of the philosophy of communism, used to rejoice in proclaiming it over and over again. The Communist Manifesto finishes with a clarion statement. The communists disdain to conceal their goals and methods. We openly state our goal can be achieved only by the forcible overthrow of all existing systems of society. Marx said force is the midwife to deliver the infant socialism from the womb of an aging, decaying capitalism. Lenin said the transition from capitalism to socialism is impossible without a violent revolution. The communists are dedicated to the use of violence. The natural question, therefore, comes to the minds of many people. They say, well, aren't you in danger? Won't the communists try to get you? Cause maybe an accident? Maybe assassinate you? The answer to that question is simple. Yes, my life is in danger. I drive with some of you people on the American highways. But if you mean, do I need to worry when I go to bed at night, lest some communist agitator is lurking round the corner with a gun, with a knife, with a bomb? The answer is no, I don't. Because the communists operate by principle. Strange principle, but to them it's communist principle. They operate by theory. They operate by philosophy. They don't operate by impulse, by urge, by accident. And they have a philosophy of violence. Bolshevism was born in conflict with the social revolutionaries and anarchists of Russia. These two traditional revolutionary groups would use violence, individual violence, terrorism, assassination as an instrument of policy. That violence overflowed into the United States, where your President McKinley was shot and killed by an anarchist. The principles that these groups used was this. They said we must stir public opinion to the gross injustices that exist. The way to focus public opinion is to assassinate some high official. So they were experts in the bomb, the ambush, the political assassination. It was into this environment that Lenin was born. And he repudiated this concept of violence entirely. He said it is unscientific. it does more harm than good. Not that it's wrong, it's unscientific. We are a movement of groups. We're a movement of classes. We limit violence to the existing situation. And where a non-revolutionary situation exists, where the governmental power is relatively stable, where conditions of crisis are not maturing so that an immediate revolution is in the offing, we limit violence to where a group of people is involved. We believe in group violence, in mass violence, where we can stimulate the emotions of a crowd, excite them, so that as a crowd they then indulge in violent acts. In these violent outbreaks, 99% of the people are unconscious that they are servants of the communist cause. We agitate them, stir them up, and we limit violence in a non-revolutionary situation to where a group or where a mass of people is involved. The riots in San Francisco were classical, typical communist violence. The very fact that the majority of the students were unconscious that they were serving the communist cause is in itself a testimony to the communist program and use of violence, because their whole program is designed to exploit the emotions, to agitate, and to create conditions such as those which came to pass. The fact that you can get students who are in the riots and get them to say the communists had nothing to do with it is an indication of your ignorance, not an indication that the communists were not the organizers of those riots. Because classical communist violence in a non-revolutionary situation is to stir up a group of people round a non-communist issue and have it break out into some violent demonstration. Now, this violence has several purposes, but one basic communist purpose is always to discredit the police, to create an image of the police as sadistic, brutal, evil, the enemy of the common people. So one basic communist objective is always to discredit the police, stir hatred and resentment against them. An indication of the success of the communist-inspired riots in San Francisco is that the day following the riots, a group of Stanford University professors who had not been present signed a statement which inferred that the police had been brutal and cruel, sadistic and monstrous, exercising unnecessary violence against the students. That, of course, was the most scientific and objective act. I think they discovered the police violence by female intuition. You know what a woman's intuition is, don't you? That strange instinct a woman possesses that always tells her she's right, whether she is or not. Now, women don't have a monopoly of this, of course. You find it sometimes in very advanced academic circles. So they knew by intuition. But that was classical communist violence, where you get a group of people stirred up. It's not that individual violence is wrong. It is unscientific. They say it does more harm than good. But where a pre-revolutionary situation exists, where there is a state of crisis, incipient revolution. Then a different policy goes into action. The policy is this: key people must now be eliminated. So they have their block captains appointed. And in this pre-revolutionary phase, individuals of special important significance are assassinated, eliminated, got out of the way. And individual violence is to be practiced during the pre-revolutionary phase. During the revolution, open killing is the order of the day. The more the merrier, the bloodier the better. During the revolutionary phase, and after the successful revolution, violence is to be manifested in two ways. Firstly, the elimination of the counter-revolutionary leadership. The communists come to power very largely on the basis of deceit. They have a large number of allies who have been deceived and are unaware of the change that they are forging, the terror they are creating. Communism advances to power by these 5 steps. The first step is the conquest of the student mind with books. As I indicated last night, the communists, the executives, the officers, the real communists are almost always recruited in the colleges and the universities. Until the communists have been able to recruit their student intellectuals, they're not able to do anything. That's the first step. The second step is the organization of these students into the Communist Party, the building of the Communist Party. The third step is the scientific exploitation of group need, group grievance, group ambition, to advance that party in popularity and in power. Communism in action just follows this program. Find out what people want. Promise it to them. Go to work to get it for them, so that you may come to power over them. So in a Marxist school, they sit down and they analyze the community. They study the different groups within it. They acquaint themselves with their basic need. Then they devise a program to advance that need. So they go to the working man and offer him higher wages, shorter working hours, better conditions. They go to the industrialist, they offer him good trading relations, industrial peace, and higher profits. Everybody knows the communists exploit the working man, but it's very, very hard for many people to face the fact that of late they have been equally, if not more successful, exploiting the businessman. It was the businessman who fawned on Khrushchev when he was over here. It was the National Bank of New York that put on the great banquet for him. Lenin it was who allegedly boasted that he'd sell the capitalist class the rope with which they'd hang themselves, and they'd buy it because they'd make a profit on the sale. All you need to do is dangle in front of them the bait to which they are sensitive, susceptible. A good contract, a good profit. Sometimes I needle businessmen a little bit, you know. How can you get them to stop from their important business long enough to pay attention to the real issue? As a visitor to your country, I sometimes get in a very embarrassing situation. I'm asked questions that are simply not fair. For example, sometimes I'm asked, what do I think of the typical American businessman? Now, that's not a fair question. I'm your guest. It's my duty to be courteous. I'm a Christian. It's my duty to be truthful. I can't possibly be both courteous and truthful. In answer to that question, that's simply not possible. So sometimes I allow my Christian duty to predominate. And I speak the truth. And I say, you are stupid. You are the most stupid segment of the American community. And you're stupid for this reason. In your own businesses, you are remarkably clever. You're not satisfied with the knowledge of the present. Oh, no, not you. You want to know the future. You lay great stress on that, so you get the finest equipment. You get skilled personnel. And you predict markets and trends 12 months, 5 years, even 10 years ahead, sometimes 15 years. But if you took that equipment and those skilled personnel and gave them the figures of communist advance and asked them to use the same principles they use for you in your daily business to predict what's going to happen in relationship to communism, the only possible conclusion you could reach is that in 10 to 15 years' time, communism will have conquered the entire earth. You won't have a business. You will have lost everything, every last dime of your assets, and probably your life. So your fundamental, inescapable, urgent business responsibility is to halt communist advance. If you spent half your assets and halted the advance of communism, and in 10 to 15 years' time had half your assets left as compared to nothing, it would be the best stroke of business you ever did. You say, how do they react? Well, they don't get mad. They cheer me to the echoes. They applaud long and heartily. They give a great standing ovation. And they go right back to the burning, passionate ambition to be the richest man in the communist liquidation line. Strange, isn't it? The communists say we're so stupid, so conditioned by our environment, that we'll only see the bait, we'll never see the hook. And that contract, that profit is the bait that will drag us to our destruction. Are they right? Sometimes I fear. Sometimes I give the illustration of how business organizations can serve the communist cause. It's amazing, every group is so defensive for itself. If you criticize some action, even indirectly, that group rushes to the defense. But if you criticize some other group, they're all with you. So every time I use this illustration, or very frequently, I get a protest from the San Francisco Chamber of Commerce. But I just keep on doing it until it ceases to be true. When it ceases to be true, at that point I will stop immediately and congratulate them. But you don't need to be pro-communist in order to serve communism. That is totally immaterial and irrelevant. All you need to be is ignorant, greedy, and selfish. Folks say everybody's against communism. So what? So what? If you're ignorant and greedy, you can be against it with every breath in your body. You'll serve it faithfully and well. Let me give the illustration of what I mean. There are two groups based in San Francisco, one of which is violently pro-communist, the other of which is vehemently anti-communist. The pro-communist group is the ILWU, the International Longshoremen and Warehousemen's Union, under the leadership of Harry Bridges. You know, I was in Hawaii and San Francisco. Sometimes I needle you Americans a little bit, and they ask me, what about Harry Bridges? I say, well, you know, it makes me proud to be an Australian. Here an Australian young man of no specific training or background comes across the ocean. He steals the Pacific Ocean. He makes it his private lake. He lets you sail upon it with his permission under conditions that he lays down. Then he takes on the entire American Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, executive, legislature, and judiciary, and licks the lot up. Why, one of these days we'll send over 5 or 6. Think what'll happen then. But here he is, dedicated communist, convicted of perjury for denying he was a member of the Communist Party, saved from deportation by the statute of limitations, head of the maritime segment of the Communist Labour International, the World Federation of Trade Unions, dedicated international communist agent for 20 years. The union he heads was expelled from the CIO because it was the voice of international communism. Now, this communist organization has a policy with regard to Red China. Their policy is recognize Red China, trade with Red China, admit Red China to the United Nations. Is that the communist policy? Khrushchev wants it. Mao Zedong wants it. The American Communist Party wants it. The ILWU wants it. Every communist organization, every pro-communist organization, every fellow traveling organization in the world want it. The communist objective is recognize Red China, trade with Red China, admit Red China to the United Nations. By all the evidence, that is the communist policy. Now, the San Francisco Chamber of Commerce is made up of businessmen dedicated to free enterprise. They hate, loathe, despise communism. But they've got a foreign trade department. And their foreign trade department also has a policy with regard to Red China. What is that policy? Recognize Red China, trade with Red China, admit Red China to the United Nations. So there is no difference between the communist policy and the policy of the Foreign Trade Department of the San Francisco Chamber of Commerce. You say, oh, has the Chamber of Commerce in San Francisco been infiltrated by communists? I don't think so. Why should they? Far better to get fervent anti-communists to carry the ball for them. They've been infiltrated by short-sighted greed and ignorance. They've no concern about the ultimate communist objective of conquest and destruction, but they have visions of fleets of ships sailing into San Francisco Bay. They have visions of bank balances swelling and growing, and because of their short-sighted ignorance and greed, they are far more efficient in this specific communist objective than the known communist agent, Harry Bridges, and his union. You don't need to be pro-communist in order to serve communism. All you need to be is ignorant, greedy, and selfish. You'll serve it faithfully and well. So communism deludes and deceives great numbers to come to power. Now, what happens to these groups after the communists come to power? I was speaking to a Catholic girls' school in Dallas. One bright young girl stood up. She said, if the communists promise these people all these things to come to power, then they don't give them to them. Why don't they throw the communists out? I said, if I get into this room by promising all you girls that I have a lotion that will make every one of you exceedingly beautiful, and as soon as I get in here, I bring out a machine gun and train it on you, why don't you throw me out? And communism is the science of deception to come to power, and the machine gun to remain in power. And the machine gun is used first against who? Against those cooperating agents who brought them to power without knowing the tyranny that they were to establish, and who, when they're under siege, are apt to lead revolt against them. So the first action of the communists when they come to power is to survey the community to discover those individuals who have capacities and qualities of leadership, particularly if this leadership was exercised on behalf of communism. Now they become dangerous. They can use that influence against communism. So the important thing is to isolate them and destroy them before they can lead the mature counter-revolutionary forces. So after they've come to power, their first objective is the destruction of the potential counter-revolutionary leadership. Richard Ahrens used to be director of the House Un-American Activities Committee. I'd call him on the phone sometimes and say, have you got any good news? He'd say, the only good news I know is that when the commos take over, all those fellow travellers, pinkos, and idiots who helped them come to power will be executed before us. When they took over the Baltic states, Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, and Poland, we discovered certain of the actual class lists of those that they picked up. The troops would move into an area, surround that area, searchlights would shine on the houses. Then the troops had the lists already prepared. They'd go from house to house, collect them for immediate execution or deportation to Siberia. There were 13 different categories. Category number one was who? The business leaders? No. They don't worry too much about them. They say they're so stupid they can fix them at their leisure. First category was this: Mensheviks, followers of Trotsky, and anarchists. Who were they? They were the people who were nearest to the communists, who understood the communist technique of infiltration, agitation, who had used it in the past in conjunction with the communists, but were not under communist discipline and control. They now became dangerous. They were the first group to be picked up. They knew how to get out and agitate and stir up a group round a grievance. So they were the first group to go. Then they had volunteers of all armies other than Bolsheviks. That would include, I believe, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines. If you were a private in the Army, they inducted you, maybe there was a chance. But volunteers of all armies other than Bolsheviks, then all peace officers, policemen, prison guards, gendarmerie of all sorts, they picked them up. Then all political leaders. These are all people who have leadership and might lead the struggle against them. Then we came to a strange group. I had to think quite a while to see the purpose, the significance of this. People who had travelled abroad, representatives of foreign firms, philatelists, and Esperantists. Now, whoever knew that stamp collecting was a dangerous vocation? But here was this category: representatives of foreign firms, people who had travelled abroad, philatelists, and Esperantists. Now, why did they pick these up? Let's place yourself in their position. They were imposing the most terrible tyranny and nightmare of murder and brutality on these countries that mankind had known. But they didn't want the rest of the world to know. So they had to cut off those with channels of communication. The one thing that's common to all these people, those who travelled abroad, they'd established friends, contacts outside. They might get a message out to them. Representatives of foreign firms, they had contacts outside. They were dangerous. Philatelists, why, stamp collectors, they build up correspondence with stamp collectors in other countries. Esperantists, they do the same thing. So they all had to go. Then we came to category 13. Pastors, church secretaries, and active members of religious denominations. And then finally, category 14, industrialists, bankers, restaurateurs, and businessmen generally. Now, doesn't it make you businessmen feel humble and ashamed to be so low down the list? They only had you in category 14. Now think of that. So the next step is liquidation of the counter-revolutionary leadership. When that's mature, the final stage goes into operation. And this stage is their real purpose, their real program, the elimination of the residual capitalist bourgeois class. The communists believed that the human species has been divided into two classes. These two classes are determined by their relationship to the mode of production. The bourgeois class they define as that class which owns the means of production. The proletarian class, the class of wage labor. According to communist theory, The bourgeois class is evil. The proletarian class is good. The bourgeois class is guilty. The proletarian class is innocent. The bourgeois class must die. The proletarian class must live. To the communists, there's nothing cruel, nothing brutal about this. Simply science, the forces of history at work. The bourgeois class, after the revolution, will be out of its environment, like a fish out of water, unhappy, miserable. Why, it'll really be a gracious and kindly action to put them out of their misery. Don't get the idea at all that they're cruel. That doesn't come into it at all. You see, people are only animals, and the communists are the farmers. And any enlightened farmer, if a few of the animals have got hoof and mouth disease, he just kills them all. Why, that's established principle. Now the bourgeois class has got hoof and mouth disease. It's evil, degenerate. You say, does Khrushchev think like this? Why, of course he does. He's a communist. He says, I've been a communist for 40 years. You say, prove it to me. That's quite simple. Khrushchev made a speech on Stalin. One of the most revealing, significant speeches ever made. Significant not merely for what it reveals about Stalin, but for what it reveals about Khrushchev. Most of the commentators missed the point of this speech entirely. They say that Khrushchev attacked Stalin. They didn't read it thoroughly. Khrushchev described Stalin. Now that's different. He described Stalin and he commended Stalin. The description was so vile that most people thought it was an attack. They missed his conclusion entirely. Khrushchev said Stalin was a murderer. Said not a reluctant murderer, a happy murderer. He liked it. He got a thrill out of it. Particularly enjoyed the torture of his own friends. When the Jewish doctors were arrested and accused of poisoning Danov, Stalin called in their interrogator and said, torture this man in this way and this man in this way. He knew them and knew their weaknesses. He gave 3 basic orders for getting the confession: beat, beat, and beat again. He finished up with this statement: if you don't get a confession by this date, we'll shorten you by a head. Khrushchev said he was insane with egotism. The faintest breath of a suggestion of criticism, he would fly into an insane rage. When you went in to see him in the morning, you never knew whether you were going out his friend or under armed guard to be shot. He'd look at you with a strange look and say, you've got a shifty look in your eye this morning. What have you been up to? Oh, it's a beautiful picture. I wish I had time to go into it. I think it should be compulsory reading in every school in America. Folks say, where can I get it? I'm proposing to go to San Francisco shortly. That's where I wrote this book, You Can Trust the Communists, and write a small book on Khrushchev's speech and republish it. The way I wrote this book, I went to San Francisco, and Dr. Yost Sluice got a crowd together, and I gave them 10 lectures, and they tape recorded them, and then they transcribed the recordings, we edited them, and here's the book. And we're going to do something the same with Khrushchev's speech and put it out so that people can read and reread and see not only what sort of a man Stalin was, but what sort of a man Khrushchev is. Because after Khrushchev has described this vile, murderous, insane character, he says, don't misunderstand me, Stalin was a good man. He said he was a Marxist-Leninist. He did these things as a Marxist-Leninist. From Khrushchev's viewpoint, of course, Stalin was good. Why, what is goodness? Goodness is the advance of communist conquest. Why, Stalin found communism a beleaguered garrison and took it to the borderland of world conquest. It was Stalin who set up their education program, which is today graduating 3 times as many engineers and scientists as the United States. It was Stalin who set up their submarine program, which has brought the shadow of potential death over the heads and homes of every one of us. It was Stalin who set up their missile program that has projected their Luniks and Sputniks into the sky. It was Stalin who organized the conquest of China with the incalculable consequences for human woe that follow from that. It was Stalin who deceived the American and free world statesmen. Stalin found communism a beleaguered garrison and took it to the borderland of world conquest. What if he did kill 50 million people for his personal pleasure? What's that? They had to die anyway, didn't they? What if they did die a few years sooner? Few generations hence, when communism has triumphed completely, socialist man, conditioned, in harmony with his environment, lives in perfect bliss. The name of Stalin, the liberator, will be honored and revered. His petty personal idiosyncrasies will be forgotten. Stalin was a good man. Then Khrushchev goes on to tell of what Stalin did to the communist leadership. He said the top committee, the Central Committee in 1934 that elected Stalin, had 139 members. Stalin had 98 of them, 70% arrested and shot for treason. 70% of the top communists of Russia. The techniques by which a man can put 70% of his top committee to death, they are inherent within the structure of the Communist Party. But Khrushchev didn't discuss that. He said, were these people guilty or innocent? How did Khrushchev discuss guilt or innocence? It's very simple. He did not discuss one feature of any individual, one action they performed, one article they wrote, one discussion they held. He did not mention one feature of any individual. That's got nothing to do with guilt. That's a different criterion entirely. Khrushchev said, I investigated their class of social origin, and 60% of them were proletarian in origin. Therefore, they couldn't have been 70% treasonable. Simple question of class mathematics. Got nothing to do with individual action. Now, don't think that the communists are going to punish you for what you've done. That's got nothing to do with it. They're going to treat you according to the class to which you belong. Now, you're a pretty bourgeois-looking lot to me. A lot of bourgeois in America, you know. There are about 15 million owners of common stocks. Add the wives and families to that lot, you've got a group. A few years back, the American Communist Party would openly acknowledge that having conquered this land, they would need to put to death 1/3 of the American people, 50 to 60 million. Not punishment, not revenge, but science, social science. So when they come for you, as they probably will, and maybe by that time they'll be up to the standards of their pupil Hitler and have gas chambers. But if they stick to the good, tried and proven old-fashioned method, and they take a wide-bore revolver with a soft-nosed bullet, and they put it at the nape of your neck, and pull the trigger, and scatter that complex of conditioned reflexes within your cranium into a chaotic, if somewhat bloody oblivion, I hope you can comfort your dying hours with the thought that you're dying in a good cause. It's in the interest of proletarian victory, socialist regeneration, and the birth of the classless society. Now, who wouldn't be willing to die for a goal like that? Well, me for one, anyway. I don't know about you, but certainly me. And from the depths of our being, there should arise a cry, it shall not be! This monstrous, insane, murderous, paranoid delusion shall not conquer and befoul the earth. Because inherent within the being, within the doctrines of communism, there is the greatest program. 14, the fool hath said in his heart, there is no God. What are the consequences? They have done abominable things. There is none that doeth good, no, not one. And emerging from this bottomless pit of godless materialism, captivating by a glamorous vision of a regenerate mankind, utilizing the perverted religious fervor of youth and every modern scientific method, this torrent is sweeping the earth, and home, and children, and church, and all we love and cherish stand in mortal danger. The tragedy is, we think about it so little, we care about it even less. In the last analysis, the battle with communism is a battle concerning the very being of God and the spiritual nature of man. The question is, can we bring to our God and his truth and his revelation of the dignity and worth of individual man the same fervent, passionate dedication the communists bring to their cause? Upon the answer to this question, there rests the destiny of your home, your children, your country, and yourself. Rise up, O men of God. Have done with lesser things. Give heart and mind and soul and strength unto the King of Kings. Rise up, O men of God. Thank you very much.